Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Primetime at the BU Library. We're into our 10th season of Primetime now, which is always very exciting. And this is a collaborative effort celebrating the experiences and accomplishments of Bethel faculty, students, and staff. And the collaboration is between the Friends of the BU Library, faculty development, and other offices on campus. If you enjoyed Primetimes, please consider becoming a member of the Friends of the Library. Ask at the Research Assistant's desk for more information on that if you're interested. And all of the recordings that are made of Primetime presentations are archived in the BU Digital Library on the library's website. And so please come back Thursday, the 26th, and Dr. Steve Henkel, Professor of Human Kinetics and Applied Health Science and Education, will share his journey by writing letters to his children and the publishing of a sports devotional. One common thread is the recognition of life lessons in everyday events. That one sounds good. And today you have me. And I was kidding people, I said I even wore the same outfit that was in the poster so everybody would know it. And so I'm here to just to share with you some of the things I've learned over the 30 years that I've been a cognitive psychologist and researcher and instructor here at Bethel. And try to, my goal is to give you just mostly foundational information about metacognition and then give you a little bit of opportunity to think about how you could apply this as you teach your classes. In what ways could it be helpful, or maybe even helpful to you as you try to learn new stuff too. As we all do, we all want to, anyway. So let me, first, this will be good. Let's first ask a few general knowledge questions of ourselves. Funny little story. I once taught cognitive psychology at 7:40 in the mornings on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And my class, of course, had quite a number of exercises like this in it. Let's test our cognitive skills, right? And at 7:40 in the morning, not with a lot of success. But what can I say? Please don't say the answers out loud if you know the answer. Just think to yourself, how confident am I of this answer first, okay? If you don't know the answer right off the bat, or if you can't think of it right off the bat, then I want you to ask yourself, would I recognize this answer if I saw it? So now we're asking the feeling of knowing question. Do you have a feeling that you know it? Okay? And just kind of give yourself a little rating. So here you go. First question, Abraham Lincoln, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and what other president are carved into Mount Rushmore? Okay? Just think it to yourself if you know it, or think, do I have a feeling of knowing? Okay? How many feet are there in a mile? And on what river is the Hoover Dam? And what is the best known work of Cervantes? Okay, you probably, well, my goal was, of course, to have at least some questions in here that would give you a feeling of knowing, even though you might not. Yeah, Joyce, would you please send some of those back that way? Here, maybe you'll need a couple more. Okay, thank you. And then Harry, you want to spend stuff around that way? Thank you. We're going to come back to these a little bit later, after we have kind of a framework in which to think about them and to think about what we know, okay? Thinking about what we know. So the broadest term, called metacognition, just covers many different kinds of memory and thought processes. And meta-memory is also a term that's used, meaning what we know about our own memory. and meta-knowledge, what you know about your own knowledge. And we'll be talking about these as we come. So on your handout is just what I like to use as kind of an overview summary of all the different metacognitive processes that have been researched, that people do know quite a bit about, how they operate and what we can get from them. Okay, how we use them and what we can get from them. So let me describe for you what's in this picture first, and then we'll be talking about some of the individual things that are here. So in this bar that's going across from left to right is kind of a timeline of the learning process, okay? From left to right, you've got the acquisition or the gaining of the information, and then you have to hold on to it for a while, right? And then at some point in the future, you've got to try to come up with it. So that's your retrieval. So there's a timeline kind of going across the page, and then pointing to the various spots on this timeline are the different metacognitive processes that on the top are monitoring the learning, okay? So on the top, you've got things like making an ease of learning judgment. During the acquisition phase, how hard is this going to be to learn, okay? And then you've got things like judgments of learning after you've studied for a little while. Have I learned it yet? You've got some feeling of knowing, like we already have talked about a little bit. And you've got some confidence. If you do come up with an answer, you can judge, how sure am I that that is the right answer? So the top boxes are what we call monitoring processes, metacognitive processes, because they're kind of watching what's happening during the learning. And then in the bottom boxes, you have control processes. Because if you can judge what it is and how well the learning is going, if you can get a sense of that from monitoring it, then you can make decisions about how to do it. You can be strategic in your learning. For example, you can select a certain kind of processing if you're expecting material to be really difficult. You probably would choose to learn it in a different way or spend different amounts of time, allocate your study time, or decide when you've got it, and then you say, okay, I think I can quit now, and so on. So you got your monitoring on the top here, you got your control processes on the bottom, just kind of pointing to the general spot in the learning process where they have their biggest impact. Are we all on the same page so far? Everybody kind of get that? So let's go kind of through the whole chart then with at least a few things about each of the various processes that are on there, the cognitive processes that are on there. So starting with the ease of learning judgments that you might make at the very beginning of sitting down to learn something new. Generally, people are pretty good at this, okay? We do, after you've been in school for a while, obviously not when you're still a really little child, but after you've been in school for a while, you do get a pretty good sense of how hard is this material going to be for me to learn, okay? And we tend to be more accurate if we're judging this, how long it will take us to learn to do something or to learn certain material. If we are asked the question, will you be able to learn this quickly? Rather than if you're asked, will you learn this thoroughly? Okay? So it probably, now this is just a sense of how to think about these ease of learning judgments. Probably what you're really doing when you're making an ease of learning judgment is asking, how much time will I need to invest to get this material, okay? You're probably asking a time-based question, mostly. Now, because most of us, we can learn practically anything. We can learn practically anything given enough time, right? So when you're asked how quickly will you be able to learn this, you can usually do a better job of judging that. Now, what I mean by a better job is that in experimental research, students such as yourselves would be asked, how much time do you think, or how quickly do you think you'll be able to learn this new material, or how easy will it be for you to learn? And so they'd make an answer on a scale such as this one, and you could do this right now. So this material, now that I've just given you an overview that we're going to talk about today, how easy will this be for you to learn about metacognition? Think your answer to yourself. It's a 1 if you think you'll be able to store it in memory immediately with no effort at all. It's a 7 if it seems like you'll never get it. I'm sure that's not any of you. But a 4 is about, it will take about average. So the students are asked this kind of question at the beginning of a learning session, or at the beginning of a presentation of material, and they make a rating, and then they are tracked to see how well they actually do learn it, okay? And that's how we know that our judgments of this are actually pretty good. So once we have made an ease of learning judgment, then now we're going to skip down to the bottom of our chart, because the ease of learning judgments that you make to monitor the material and to allow you to use a control process. So if you think that material is going to be easy or hard, you can decide what kind of processing you're going to use on it. An elaborative processing is the best. An elaborative processing is the one you want to use if the material is going to be challenging at all, and if you want it to last in memory at all, or any length of time. You want an elaborative process in which the student tries to connect that new information with other information that they already know, tries to find more connections between things, thinks of its implications the material has for themselves, for their own lives, for their own activities, etc. This is elaborative processing, and this is really what you want if you want that material to last in memory and hang around for you. Surface processing is probably what we usually do, though, unfortunately, and you should expect it's not going to be there for very long. We select the kind of processing. We select how long we're going to study. We do, and here again, in making these kind of choices, we do generally see that people can devote more time, and they will devote more time on material that they judge to be more difficult. So there again, you've got your monitoring. If you're making fairly accurate judgments of how long and how hard this will be, then you can make a fairly good judgment of how much time you should spend studying. A little side note though, and here again, when we start thinking about how do we apply this, if we're trying to learn something ourselves, we're trying to encourage students to learn something. One of the little side observations that's come out of the research is that if your time is limited, if you only have a certain amount of study time to spend, what's the best thing to spend it on? You might think right off the bat that, oh, you gotta spend that time then on the hardest stuff, okay? But actually, it's just the opposite. The research shows if your study time is limited, spend that study time on easier material, and your final score will show better, okay? But these things you have to think of using in the right context, in the right settings, right? That would make sense to everybody. Any questions, please feel free to flag me down. Now, when do you decide that you know the material? Okay? Can you tell after you've studied for a while that you've learned it? Again, people can be fairly accurate as long as they're looking at the right thing. And so when are we the most accurate? And who here liked Make It Stick, the book that some of us talked about? Yeah. This was one of the main lessons, right, Gretchen, that we got from Make It Stick. If you judge whether you've learned something diagnostically, okay, then by definition that means you got to test yourself a little while after you finish studying, okay? You've got to let a little while go by because your short-term memory is going to hold on to that material that you were just learning, that you were just studying. And it's going to hold on to it for a while, for a little while. So if you try to judge immediately after you've studied whether you learn it or not, you're going to have a very strong feeling that you do. Oh, I got this now. It's going to feel very familiar to you, okay? The only way to get a really diagnostic sense of whether you've learned it or not is to wait for a little while and then check yourself later. And a little while should probably be an hour or more, during which time you are distracted thinking about something else. If we do that, if we do a good diagnostic judgment of whether we've learned something or not, then we also are pretty good at deciding whether it's time to quit studying or not. So judgments of learning are the monitoring process that allows for the control process that decides, okay, I'm done, I've done enough. So we're moving through our little chart here, and we've kind of covered the acquisition phase of information to here. In the middle there, you see we've kind of just got retention, and there's nothing actually pointing at the retention phase because that's sort of when the information just sits there, more or less. Sits there for whatever amount of time you hope it does sit there. And so what about that feeling of knowing then? The one that we, oh, and here's the answers to your questions, everyone. Okay. Examples, quite a few more, of course, than just the 4 that I gave you, were given to a group of undergraduate students to try to answer, and they were asked if they could not immediately answer it, to give a rating as to whether they could choose the correct answer from 4 options, like a multiple choice test. So here's your answers. Did everybody have Teddy Roosevelt, that 4th president who's in Mount Rushmore? Okay. 5,280 feet. The Colorado River. Colorado River has the Hoover Dam on it, and Don Quixote. Ah, good. Okay. So there's your answers. Now, the interesting results of that come out from this. So then we can look after students have given a rating of their feeling of knowing the answer. Then they take the multiple choice test, and then we can look at how accurate they really are. You know, do they get it right on the multiple choice test if they thought they would? Okay? And so in the results that come out of an experiment like this, here are the different ratings. The 1, 2, and 3 are basically a no, I don't think I know this, but maybe I do, okay, is a 3. And then the yes, I think I do know it, are the 4, 5, and 6 ratings. 6 is really, really positive, and I know this. I know it will jump right off the page at me, that feeling. And here are the percentages then on the multiple choice test that the students got right after having answered a whole bunch of this type of general knowledge question. And if you look at those for a few moments, maybe some interesting patterns will pop out at you that will tell us something about just how accurate our feeling of knowing is. when you have that feeling, notice at the bottom end of the scale, did any of you have a, no, I'm sure I don't know that, or was that what you were thinking for the number of feet that are in a mile? Were you sure you didn't know it? Absolutely positive you didn't know it. So you were a 1, okay? When people feel that sure that they don't know it, they still get it right 30% of the time. Now remember, this is a 4-choice multiple choice test. So you should, by guessing, get 25% of them right. People are doing better than chance. They don't think they know that at all, but they actually do know a little something there that they don't realize that they know. Okay? And then we get up here into the middle, and about the middle, yeah, you've got people getting, and look at this one, they're still thinking, no, I don't know, I won't know this. But maybe there's a chance that I'll recognize it when I see it, but I don't think so, okay? So they're answering a 3, but they're getting it right 50% of the time now. Yes, on the yes side, now here, the pattern switches. So notice that if they're thinking, no, I don't know it, they're underestimating what they know. So everybody see that? Look at the top half. If they're saying, yes, I think I do know it, okay, all right, maybe they're okay with a 4, they're getting 60% right, 61%. But even when they're totally positive, they're saying 6, yes, I know this, they're only getting it right 75% of the time. So we have an interesting kind of reversal of the pattern here, such that if your feeling of knowing is really strong, it's actually an overestimate, probably, of what you know. When your feeling is, I don't know this, you have a feeling of not knowing, then you're probably underestimating a little bit what you know. Now, not to make this picture look too bad, right? Because there still is obviously a nice strong correlation here between how high you rated your feeling of knowing and whether you got it right or not, okay? So we do have some accuracy in these. We just have to know how they can lead us a little bit astray so that we can use them to the best advantage. Where does that feeling of knowing come from? Did anybody, who all had a feeling of knowing to the first, one of the first 4 questions? Did everybody, so many of you did. You had a feeling, at least for one of the questions, right? Okay, where did that feeling of knowing come from? What makes you think, I should know that? Gretchen?
I was pretty sure it was Theodore Roosevelt, and I had in my mind, I tried to picture when I was at Mount Rushmore, the 4th face. So I was trying to conjure up a picture.
Okay.
And I would have given myself a 6 for knowing that. I wasn't absolutely positive, but really pretty sure.
And then when you saw Theodore Roosevelt answer, you thought, yes, and then validated that feeling, right?
Yeah.
That's a great example because it actually captures both of these mechanisms that are operating when we have a feeling of knowing. One thing was that you probably retrieved part of the answer. When you were thinking, oh, what does that mountain look like again up there? Yeah, I can see those faces, okay. You're partially retrieving the information. And the more that you can retrieve, then of course the stronger feeling you're going to have that you do know that information. But then you also remembered what? You remembered an experience of learning. Oh yeah, when I was at Mount Rushmore, I must have learned who was in that mountain, right? I must have learned this. And so now you're using an inferential mechanism because you're not actually retrieving any information, but you are remembering having learned it, and so you're thinking, yes, I do. Now, just one quick thing then about these, and again, I'm just bringing in some of the terminology, some of what the research has shown us is actually happening during these things, so that you can continue to be thinking about how do you use this to your benefit. But one of the things I always tried to do in class when I was teaching classes was to ask my students to remember when they would have learned something, especially in a prerequisite course, okay? So I would be teaching research principles, but I would say to them, now all of you have had basic statistics. Yes, yes, nod your head then. Yes, make them admit, yes, they had, because they had to. If they were in my class, they had to have had that. And so yes, they remembered it. So what I could do then is work with that remembrance. So this is an inferential mechanism now, right? But if they know they must have learned this at some time in the past, and if they can come up with any of that memory of that particular experience, that will help them to remember the information, okay? Because their feeling of knowing, if I can get their feeling of knowing stronger, they will try harder to retrieve the information. And that's where we're going next, because we are, oh, and confidence, I should say something about that too before we go back to our chart. But we did notice at the high end of the scale, of the feeling of knowing scale, was a good bit of overconfidence. Yes, I know this. Okay? And actually, overconfidence tends to affect the entire learning process, not just after study. So keep that in mind too, that you can be feeling like, absolutely, I know this. But it can be a bit of an overconfidence feeling, okay? One of those cognitive biases, of which we have many. We have more information on the answers that we do retrieve than on the answers that we don't retrieve. And the ease of retrieving an answer, how quickly and fluently, we talk about the fluency of an answer. That is also related to the confidence then that you have the right answer. So if you were able to think of Teddy Roosevelt right off the bat, you're going to have more confidence that that is a right answer for that question than if it took you a little while puzzling, okay? So we're now over here. So we've been talking about feeling of knowing a little bit, which is important for deciding when you're going to stop studying. But now we're at the retrieval process, sometime in the future after learning the material, when you want to come up with it again, okay? And the tasks that you have to do when you want to retrieve the information is search for it. You're going to have to go through those memory banks and see what you can pull out. And then, of course, at some point, and this was actually an area that my own research I got very interested in, is the termination of a search. I did a lot of research on how long should you try to think of an answer before you stop. It seemed relevant to me, especially on timed exams that students had to take, where, and especially if you were penalized for guessing on some of these standardized exams, that you really need to have some strategy in mind for how long to work on a question that you know is going to be hard for you versus to move on to another question and try to get more correct by not wasting your time. The feeling of knowing can help you in these decisions too. So in the selection of a search strategy, okay, if you have a feeling that you know it, just like Gretchen started thinking about the time the family visited Mount Rushmore. okay? This was a specific search strategy that she thought, if I can pull up some of the information surrounding that event, I can get more, okay? So you pick your search strategy, work on the easier questions first, especially if the test is timed. Now by easier, I mean the ones that you'll have a stronger feeling of knowing for. Work on those first and make good time management decisions. And then quit. When should you quit? I found that this was actually a rather understudied area in this whole realm of metacognition, because we tended in all of our research to let people just kind of work on trying to come up with answers until we told them their time was up. But in real life, okay, put yourself at the mixer or the party, okay, whatever party you're running around with friends, right? And then you see that familiar looking person, okay? And you're thinking, oh, what is this person's name? All right? And now you have a strong feeling of knowing, pretty strong. How long do you try to think of that person's name? One of the things I really liked looking at in my research was when I asked people to make a decision about giving up on one search and moving to a different one. Because isn't this what we really have to do in life, okay? If you could think forever first about some answer that you're trying to come up with, well, you know, or if you know you only have to think until the experimenter tells you, okay, your time is up, or the instructor tells you, okay, your time is up, turn in your sheets, right? You're not making the everyday kind of decisions that we need to make. How long should I try to think of this person's name while I'm still meeting other people as I wander around the big mixer, okay? Because you're judging and making a trade-off here. In real life, all your cognitive processes have to be subject to trade-offs, right? Can I afford more time to try to come up with this answer if I need to be doing this at the same time? Or I need to move on to think about something else, right? Real life is about trade-offs, much more so than just doing what the experimenter asks you to do. So how do you decide when to quit looking through your memory for something? You can rely on your feeling of knowing, right? It is correlated with how likely you can come up with the answer, okay? Search longer when your feeling of knowing is stronger. Now, that might seem so obvious. You're thinking, well, duh, right? But in the tasks I have given people, myself, in my own research projects, I've noticed a general tendency to give up on well-known answers. When the feeling of knowing was strong, people generally give up too soon. Yeah. Now that may have been mainly an artifact of the research method that I was using. I was giving people two different tasks to work on. I was having them start on one of them and decide themselves when's the best time to switch to the other one. And I had them motivated to earn points, and then they could win money, okay? Can't do better than that with research subjects, right? They could earn money if they could get a lot of points from this. So when's the best time to switch? And they made suboptimal choices, almost always. It was the rare person that I found who made their choice of when to switch at the right time, okay? So the lesson to take just from my experience on that is pay attention to that feeling of knowing, because our general tendency is to give up on it too quickly. Switch to working on other test items, okay? If you keep coming up with the same incorrect answer every time you reiterate the search, okay? If the time cost of the current search becomes too high. You can judge these things. This is what I want to reassure you, everybody of. You can judge these things fairly accurately. If you're thinking, how long is it going to take me to come up with an answer on this particular math problem, okay? And if you can tell that it's going to take you a long time, you could probably get it, but man, that one's going to take me a long time. Move on to other things. Come back to the hard one if you have time, but don't invest too much. This was the other thing I noticed in a lot of the research that I had students doing in my own lab. I'd give them a hard category to search. One of the tasks I used a lot was tell me all the animals you can think of, tell me all the types of footwear that you can come up with, tell me all the, okay? And some of these categories are quite a bit more difficult to come up with things than other ones are. Animals, colors, these are easy categories. Difficult categories. Let's see, the names of capital cities of the world. You can imagine. Types of footwear, that one wasn't too bad. People could do okay, moderately on footwear. Diseases, that was a hard one. Types of diseases, interestingly enough, yes. Anyway, if they almost always if they started on a difficult category, they spent too much time on it. This is kind of the other side of the coin of not paying enough attention when you have a strong feeling of knowing. If you're sensing that I probably don't know any more of these diseases, I'm probably not going to come up with many more of these. Leave it, okay? I think we get a little bit invested, and I started to notice this. I probably have run several thousand participants, over the years in this kind of task. And so I think there's a little bit of sort of a feeling of investment if you're given this task to do and you get started on it, and then you sort of want to do it well, and you want to come up with lots of diseases or birds. Birds is actually kind of a hard category for most people too. So you want to come up with lots of them, and you struggle, but you don't want to abandon it. So watch out for that feeling. If that time cost of the search that you're working on gets too high, leave it. Or if searching for something else in your memory is going to be more valuable to you, go to that search. Okay, start thinking about that. That really does mean if you're in the mixer and you're thinking, oh, I've got to know this person's name right here, right? But then somebody more important shows up at, across the room. Okay, leave that search and go do another search, okay? So here we are at the end, but a few minutes to think about applications then. Applications of this. So there's our chart one more time. Anybody want to share an idea how you're thinking you could improve, first of all, the accuracy of your metacognitive processes, these judgment processes that you're doing? How do you get better at that?
Space or practice.
Practice and space it out. And interestingly enough, people who know more knowledge are better at judging how much they know. Kind of an interesting combination there. It may just be a general advantage in cognition overall. Cognitive processes overall are quicker or better for some people than for others. But if they know more, they're also a little more accurate at judging how much they know. But you can get better with practice at judging how much you know. And then how do we use those metacognitive control processes to enhance your own learning processes? When and where do you apply them? Profs, when do you use them in the classroom?
Do you think in the classroom that information retrieval is the most important thing we teach, or does it have more to do with process and reasoning?
Is more important?
I mean, I think it's very common for freshmen to come in and think, I can learn to do physics if I just learn this stuff so I can retrieve it out of my head. But that has almost nothing to do with physics. I'm more interested in the reasoning and attitudinal change. If you're a pietist, you believe in your teaching, you need to convert people. You need to convert them to the importance of your, that's also part, and to me, metacognition includes that as much as information retrieval. From this, it would seem you're talking mostly about information retrieval.
At the end we started out with, acquiring the information. How long will it take you to learn to do these things? What strategies will it take for you to acquire the information?
If
Motivation, yes, the fun aspect is motivational. And yeah, you won't have anybody learning anything if you don't motivate them in some way or another. Some students are internally motivated and many are externally motivated. And unfortunately, the research shows us that the longer that they're a college student, the more externally motivated they become. I know, it's kind of sad, isn't it? I always hated those kind of findings when I read them in the articles. So you're starting out a lesson. What do you do first? Give an overview and ask your students.
Where have they learned it before?
Sorry, Gretchen?
Where have they learned it before? Or
What do they already know about this? Absolutely. When have they learned it before? And how hard is this going to be for you to learn? Okay? How hard? Because right off the bat then, you've got them thinking, okay, this means, okay, the prof again is talking about studying, or, what else do profs ever talk about, right? But yes, and you've got them thinking, how much will I need to invest to learn this? If they're not thinking that right at the beginning, they're not with you. And already their chances of success and mastery are decreasing. So right at the beginning, you're asking them, how much will it take for you to learn this? And make sure that they're not showing another common cognitive bias, which is, oh, this is going to be really easy. Okay? And then after you've been studying and talking for a while in class, then what are you going to do? Perhaps this is what I'm trying to do right now. Recall. Yeah. Recall, or tell me what you're going to do with this information. Make you use it somehow, right? How confident are you that you've got this? Do an not an ease of learning, a judgment of learning. Rating at that point, okay? Has everybody got it? Do you think you've got it? Now again, the accuracy is not perfect on these, but we're talking about practicing our metacognitive skills just like you'd have to practice and rehearse the information itself, right? Because the metacognitive skills will lead you to choosing the best control strategy.
Well, I'm trying to connect this to something else that Jay taught me about, one of the Harvard thinking strategies. So like you do some work in the classroom and then you say, how does this connect to what you already know? How does it extend your knowledge? And what new questions do you have? So I'm trying to lay that on top of this,
Right.
and I'm not doing a very good job of it. Is it something that can be laid on top of this?
Oh,
or
yes.
do you,
I think-
can you help me think through that?
Yes, I definitely think that at the very least, they can happen together. I think what you're doing when you're asking them to connect it to the things that they already know, okay, is an excellent way of helping them to choose the right strategy for laying the
Okay.
information down in mind, okay? So whether or not you're actually enhancing, it wouldn't hurt to point out to them that what you're doing when you ask them to do that, connect this to something you already know, okay? What you are actually asking them to do then is a metacognitive process, and sometimes it can help to just label it as such, because they may not realize that that's what they're doing. I mean, all of us are doing that all the time, you know, judging whether we know these things or not, or how much time will I have to work on this, okay, to get it. And so we are doing these things, we may not realize that that's what we're doing. It does help to bring into awareness, to point it out to them, okay? Here's one of your strategies that you might select. If you know this material is going to be challenging, you can connect it up to stuff that you already know. Use that strategy. You're making a metacognitive choice when you do that. So that there's one connection, and then what's the rest of the Harvard
How does
thing?
this extend, what you learned,
Oh.
extend your knowledge, and what new
Mhm.
questions do you have, or
Mhm.
what don't you understand?
Right.
Is the second.
Let's think about connections of those things. The extensions and the questions that you still have feel to me more motivational
Okay.
than metacognitive,
Okay.
kind of. You're really just trying to help the students to feel like, there's more I want to learn.
Thank you.
Right, right. Anything else? Any other questions? Any other comments? Does everybody have some good ideas to use? Use them on yourself. That's what I do. Not always with success, but I try to use them on myself. Thank you. Thanks for being here.